All right, so we're officially recording. So yeah, thank you, Tori and Adam, first of all, for agreeing to do this. Thank you for agreeing to do this. So I'll just give you guys a breakdown of what I was thinking that we do. So I came up with some questions to ask you both. And be completely honest. Like if you don't know, it's okay. Like no one's expecting us to know everything. Like we're not the Lord. And so people really want to hear from you. And I think honestly just want to hear us have a conversation. I've been hearing a lot of people like say things, but very few people actually having a conversation. So I think that's my heart and my goal for this. So yeah, and then if we have enough time, I wanted to do kind of a part two okay, so the first part is us asking you questions, and then the second part is you all asking us questions. So any questions that you have, but pertaining around like us being Black or our Black experience or being Black in the church and things like that.
Yeah.
So
I think also for people watching, maybe we should say what this is exactly. Like,
oh yeah, the video hasn't started yet. I was just giving Adam and Tori.
I don't work here. You're right.
Yeah.
This is my show.
So just wanted to give you both a breakdown, and then so next I'm just going to introduce us, then introduce you, and then we'll jump into the questions. Sounds
awesome.
Good? Do you guys have any questions at all before we start? No? All right.
You go.
We'll just chat.
Okay. Hey everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. Welcome back to my channel if it's your first time. I'm here with my husband, Javier, and we have two very special guests with us, three, as you can hear my son in the background. But we're here with two very special guests, our friends, Adam and Tori. So Adam and Tori, can you tell everyone just a little bit about who you are and how you know us?
Sure. So I'm Tori. This is Adam. We know Jamie and Javier from Riverside Church, been good friends for a few years. I personally have spent a few days at the park with Jamie and Nathan, and we have two little girls. Amelia's almost 3, Isabel's 1. You can talk about your work, I guess.
Yeah, I actually, I worked with Jamie at Riverside Church and had great experience. She was such an excellent member of the team, really left a huge impact. And yeah, so we worked together, and Jay and I know each other because of Jamie, and we've connected, we've hung out a few times. And yeah, I'm the worship director at Riverside Church for what that's worth, just for some context, but yeah.
And what about you, Tori? Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. So I think I would, for work-wise, I don't work that much. I'm a nurse, but my main job is taking care of our girls, but my job I get paid for, I'm an ICU nurse down in Hollywood, so pretty cool. I work with adults. Little crazy right now, obviously, with the pandemic, so definitely enjoy my days off and work hard on the days that I'm working.
She saves lives. She's pretty awesome.
She is pretty awesome. Yeah. Awesome, guys. Thank you. So the first question that I have, we're going deep really quick, is how would you describe your upbringing and what you were taught about Black people?
You want to go first?
You go first, ladies first.
Sure. So I've grown up in South Florida, and I didn't realize really until I was an adult, like how unique South Florida is from the rest of the country, honestly, in general. Like I was homeschooled, but so I didn't like go to public school, but I had jobs and stuff. And I didn't realize how culturally diverse we were until like I went to Georgia. I'm like, wow, everybody's white here. But I do feel like my family is pretty traditional. My grandma's from Alabama, grew up with Confederate flags and everything. So definitely have that influence on my mom's side of the family. But I've loved growing up here. It's been really cool. So I've lived here my whole life, Floridian through and through. I love all the food and all the different cultures that intersect.
Nice. What about you, Adam?
Yeah. So, like can you, I just wanted to make sure that I get the question clearly. So what was the question again?
Can you give some background about your upbringing and, kind of how you were raised in terms of your upbringing in regards to Black people? So
Okay.
general and then a little bit more specific.
Cool. Yeah, so I come from a big family. I was born and raised in Boston, Massachusetts. I have 5 brothers and sisters. My mom is Italian and my dad is Puerto Rican. And grew up in it, like all I know is church. So everything that my whole life experience socially too, because you're all homeschooled, was like predominantly church, and then just, neighborhood kids, and grew up in a very, I would say, diverse church. We were in inner city Boston. So like my experience growing up, we had just as many white friends that my parents had, or us growing up, we had Black, and also maybe in a more unique instance, we have also family in our, like, direct members of our family that are Black as well. So I have a first cousin, a second cousin, and then a ton of cousins that I have yet to meet on my Puerto Rican side that are Black. So it's like, growing up in church and then in our family, I would say we've, having, that experience. So.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Sweet. So I guess, what I'd be looking to hear too, maybe from you both, is with regards to, okay, so maybe if I give an example of my story, it will help you answer it from your perspective. So as a Black male growing up in South Florida, we have presumptions about white people, right? As someone who grew up in, a relatively low socioeconomic situation, our experience with whiteness mostly came from our teachers at school, police officers, and television. That was the majority of what we knew about white people. For you, and that shaped our view of white people mostly. For you guys, what shaped your view of Black people growing up, and has it changed since then?
That's a good question.
Yeah, there we go. Hopefully I articulated that well.
No, I think
question.
that definitely helps. I could probably answer this a little bit better.
Yeah.
So I grew up being homeschooled, and I was born in 93. So like in the 90s, when I was growing up, most of my homeschool friends were super conservative white people. And I think that has changed since. My sister is, she's 4 years younger, and even her group of homeschool friends, there was more Black people, more diverse people getting into homeschooling. But it's like my group growing up, like I did sports and stuff, and most of my friends were white, and that was the community I was in. Like I would consider myself very conservative, my parents very conservative, so I definitely had a different upbringing. And I feel like as far as community, like for me, being like having more Black friends and different cultures happened when I was in high school. And then when I was in college and kind of branching out, I went to Christian Life Center for a little bit. I went to their youth group, and then that's like a much more diverse youth group than the one I grew up in. That was a little like Assemblies of God church with 50 people. And then of course going to college, and I've worked in Pembroke Pines and Hollywood now. Yeah. And it's been really cool for me. So I would say I grew up with most, like my parents' friends were like white or Cuban, and those were you kind of become friends with who your parents are friends with and who their kids are, and those become your friends. So I feel like for me, it's been more recent years, like in the last 4 or 5 years, where I have more friends who I would call close friends that are Black friends. Because I feel like growing up, all my friends just look like me, similar socioeconomical status. Like I grew up kind of middle class America. especially I think to homeschool your kids, you have to have a parent that is able to stay at home, and that's not financially feasible for most people. So I was really blessed to have had that experience. And, you know, my mom was home with us most of the time to really spend that time doing that. And then my dad was able to work and allow her to do that and give us a really good upbringing and education, I think. So I would definitely consider myself privileged in that way.
Right. I think, you know, I would say a lot of what like informed me, like, you know, how I was formed in regards to looking at like Black people, has evolved, like from, I would say, like very, very early childhood to moving from Boston to South Florida, getting older, moving to a different state. But like growing up, I was surrounded by, like, we had in our particular church, like I was always around Black people. And not only that, they were like geniuses from MIT. And so I was always surrounded by like that. And just also that they were from Africa. A lot of them there was a handful of them that were Nigerian transfer students to MIT. And so for them to kind of sharing their culture, and then that kind of mixed with like an obsession with like the Civil War. And I was from the North, and I was in Massachusetts learning about the 54th Mass, which was the first Black regiment, like legit Black regiment in the Civil War. And like, you know, growing up listening to R&B, you know, my dad was big R&B, Motown, but both my parents love that. So like, that's like my upbringing. That's all I knew. Like the first worship leader, I'm a worship leader. The first worship leader I saw was Ron Canoli, Lift Him Up. You know, I listened to Fred Hammond, Commission. So like that was, I always, in my early years, I always saw Black people as like up, like, you know, we had Black pastors, like so like there wasn't like a disparity until like I moved to South Florida.
Yeah.
And then we moved from like being in like inner city Boston, you know, being around a lot of like, you know, college, you know, young people, to North Miami, where like we were staying with my grandma and we were going to sleep to the sound of gunshots. Then my view of Black people changed, because the majority of the people in that neighborhood dressed a lot differently than the Black people that I knew in Boston did, and acted a lot differently than in my experience. And so then I tried to then paint, you know, see what I learned from pop culture, you know, from like, whether it's watching Fresh Prince or Family Matters and all those things, and being like, oh, this must be this type of, you know, demographic, if you will, like a lot different. Like I grew up around a bunch of Uncle Phils and Carltons, if that makes sense. You know, like that, if that's like the best way I can kind of explain it. And then coming to South Florida and then realizing that, you know, that's not necessarily, I mean, when we moved down, I was like 7. So I was just like, oh, you know, we're fine. The world is fine. You know, like we want the right side won in the Civil War. So things are good. And then until I started to realize too, like, okay, why are we living in areas? And then when we moved to a different area, there was much less of a representation when we moved to like a middle. And so I started, like, it took years. Then finally when I moved to Georgia at like 15, and we moved to an area where there was like literally no Black people. And I was like, this is really weird. Because like it almost made me uncomfortable, because I'm so used to, you know, I mean, we even have Black people in our family, so it's just like, it was too white. So that's kind of, I would say, like my upbringing and pop culture kind of informed me about Black people. So watched a lot of comedy too, like that's like, those are the things that really kind of help, I guess, piece things together, if you will. So
yeah. That's good. That's good, and it's interesting. I'm always curious as to where people learn about Black people from, particularly if they don't have a lot of Black people in their social groups, you know. And I do find it's very common that popular culture is like the megaphone for Blackness.
Yeah.
You know, television, music. I know
music for sure.
Yeah, those are tent poles, I think, for learning about Black identity. Yeah, that's a big one. Pop culture, that's a big one. I heard that. You, Adam, it sounds like you had a lot of, and what's interesting also, and I mean, babe, maybe you can speak to this too, is that the different kinds of Blackness that you find in different parts of the country, right? So Adam experienced African Black, right? You know, these are
Black
people,
Africans.
Black Africans who are Africans, who are not necessarily African American, but some, they could be African American, but some could not be. They could be African, and that's a particular kind of Black
Culture.
experience in America, which that nuance of Blackness is not often understood. You know, people just kind of usually lump Black people all in the same category, but no, it's very nuanced. You have the Black African who's
Caribbean,
not necessarily African American. You have the Caribbean Black person who is probably not American or is American, you know, depending on their status. And then you have the African American, you know, and, you know, how do you tell them apart? So, like, I heard all three of those present in your story. So it was just interesting. That's a lesser talked about fact, but okay. Yeah. Great icebreaker.
Yeah, that's so good. So good. So, as I'm sure both of you are aware, during the pandemic, there have been several events that have happened that have particularly affected Black people in a significant way. But I think honestly, like all people, not even only the Americans, but around the world. And so I wanted to really hear, just hear you both share about your thoughts about the recent events. Just your thoughts. And I'm specifically speaking about, I guess we'll start in kind of chronological order. During the pandemic, did you all hear about the Ahmaud Arbery case? Okay, so let's just start from there. You know, we're all in the pandemic, and the Ahmaud Arbery, I guess news breaks. What were your initial thoughts about that? And then, leading into, the George Floyd case, I guess, what were you all, thinking, or what did you hear? Just really want to hear your thoughts.
Sure. You want me to go first? Okay.
Yeah.
So at first, like when I heard about Ahmaud Arbery, I think that was like back in March or April. I don't know the exact dates. And it's just been a crazy year, like 2020. And I was just like, what is going on? Like the hospitals have been so busy. Like my ICU is all COVID. And I want to be completely honest. And I was just like, I can't handle more stuff. And I'm just like, so what happened? Like, okay, this guy got shot. And honestly, my first impression was like, was he breaking and entering or something? Like, I assumed like, oh, he must have been doing something wrong to have been shot. Like, why would somebody just go and shoot somebody? Mm-hmm. And then like, it was probably a few days before I actually did some research or talked to friends about like, okay, what actually happened? I just heard like, okay, a Black man was shot while running. And I was like, okay, maybe he was running away from a scene of him committing a crime. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until a few days later where I was like, oh, people are still talking about him. Like, let me look up and see what this was. Mm-hmm. And then I saw like he was just running, jogging, and these two radical people shot him. And I just feel like I was in shock. Like how insane is somebody to do that? Like, how wrong is that? And I that just really opened my eyes, because I've run at night before, and as a woman, I'm like, okay, I shouldn't run at night. Like, if there's somebody close by, like I should be kind of careful. But I never actually thought I would be just shot and died from it. So it's just been crazy. And then George Floyd, the same thing. I was like, wow, like this guy died from the police. And I honestly, I assumed the same thing. I was like, was he resisting the police? Was he doing something really bad and then he was fighting them back? Was he trying to pull a gun on them? And I kind of assumed like there was something else going on, and it probably wasn't until somebody just knocked at the door. Adam's gonna go. We're in a hotel room, but I don't know if it's housekeeping or something. So the same thing with George Floyd. I was like, okay, he had to have been like resisting them or trying to fight back or something. And then when I saw the video, I think everybody had that response. Like, how does that happen? Like that, I think everybody can agree now, he was murdered. Like that was, he's saying, I can't breathe. And what amazed me was that there was so many people standing around witnessing and watching this happen. And he still ended up dying. Like he was suffocated and strangled, basically. His supply to his lungs got cut off. And I mean, I could just keep going. I don't know.
Breonna Taylor.
Breonna Taylor, another one. And honestly, and those two cases with the police brutality, even if the people, like, I think in both of those cases, they weren't resisting the police. Even if they were in the wrong in any way, they didn't deserve to die. And I think it's caused me to question, like, this is wrong. Like, and then realizing, talking with my Black friends, that, like, I've never had that fear. Like, we've had the cops knock on our door, and, like, my heart doesn't sink. I'm like, okay, the cops are here. Like, what's going on? I'm not like scared. If the cops come to our door and knock, like, I'm like, okay, how can I help you? What's going on? I've never thought like, oh, they're here for me. Like I did something wrong, or they're profiling me or anything. Or if I get pulled over by the cops, I oftentimes get away without getting a ticket. And it's because I ran a red light, or it's because I was speeding, or I have a tail light out. It's not because I was just driving. Yeah. And I think I was really naive and oblivious to that's not true for other people. And I'm sure you guys can attest to that. I'm sure you guys have stories.
Yeah, I remember specifically where I was at, like when because I got the video just forwarded to me. So I was sporadically going on social media, and then a friend of mine, Stanley, he's just sent me the video. And I just opened it up. I had my AirPods in, and there, it was like not full blast, but the volume was up. And I just remember hearing the gunshots, and it's being like, no, that didn't just happen. Like, and then just realizing, and like and then literally then kind of looking more at like the title of the video and everything, and just then seeing the date in which it happened, and the date that I got it, which was in March, but knowing that this had happened way before then, and I was just like, what the heck? Like, why? Like, and there was there was a number of emotions, but I was just going back and forth with Stanley, being like, what in the world? And immediately I shared the video, because I was like, it was infuriating. It was like, I don't need any more context. A guy, like, I watched the video, and it was the thing that really, man, there's just a lot I want to say about this, but I think what got me at first, because I felt like it was almost a no-brainer for me to just immediately be like, this is wrong. This is beyond wrong. It's demonic. And as a Christian, I looked at it first. I'm like, this is a Imago Dei. Like this is we bleed the same. And I'm like, this is wrong against, like, it's God, like this is God's creation, killing itself. And I think moving forward, hearing people that I love, but I just feel like are still learning, saying like, well, we need a little bit more context. And I'm like, or like, we need to, wait for the investigation. And I'm just kind of like, I don't know about that, man. And then those same people being mad quiet when the 8 minutes and 46-second video of George Floyd being murdered, just for what it is. It's not, and I even like struggle with people saying like, him being killed, because it was murder, plain and simple. Like, and seeing people just being like, well, we don't know, like there was an issue at the ATM. And I literally, I was like a person, I'm like, let's just stop right there. And I'm like, if you had an issue at the ATM, I'm like, you like, they're just like, well, we don't know, like, we got to, and I'm like, no, man, like, this is like what it, and then realizing more and more, I'm like, dude, we are still so far from that. And I remember too, that it kind of all culminates, because I remember years ago, when Trayvon Martin was killed by George Zimmerman.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like kind of at the height where I was just still trying to find myself politically, and because a lot of it was at the moment was being politicized, and I, was sort of just in that like, well, we don't really know. And I remember my dad, who was an ex-cop, my dad like kind of grabbed a hold of me before I even like said anything, and he's just like, you need to not say a single word. And just realizing like, why did he do that? And then later on, after Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd, my dad started to open up and share stories about how he was as a cop, was in, he was driving around, and he was with his sergeant at the time. My dad was like a new officer, and my dad's like, Pizarro, pull that car over. My dad's like, they're not speeding. What's going on? He's like, well, there's 4 black guys in the car. One of them's got to have a record. And like, if you know my dad, like, this is like, my dad grew up, they were the only Puerto Rican family in an all black neighborhood. And so like my dad, like culturally, like, my dad, like I loved watching SNL. My dad watched In Living Color. Like, I enjoyed listening to other music, it's just, but like, so my dad, he reported the sergeant went on administrative leave, and multiple times officers tried to plant evidence on my dad that he was like stealing money, that he was doing all that stuff, and they had to move him to the DARE. He asked to be moved to the DARE program because they basically kind of put a hit out on my dad. And just realizing, kind of connecting the dots, that systemic racism isn't just like, rooted in the people, but yeah, it's rooted in government. It's rooted in like in the police, like, and just in every, well, I think it's all, I think we can all like do a fishbone and trace it and say like it's just sin. But I think to really address like the particular sin, we have to say that it's in these particular things that have been used specifically to oppress people of color. So so I would just characterize the whole experience with Ahmaud Arbery, with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, just a lot of it, just disbelief, hurt, and a desire for me to at least to do my part in whatever that looks like. So for a lot of me was just to, instead of like heavily engaged on social media, it was just to, and barrage my friends who are black about like books to read. And I'm grateful that a lot of people just were gracious. I was messaging a lot, just being like, I need some books. I just want to get ahead of the curve with my children, and so that's where it drove me to prayer, to how do I allocate my finances in a way to better this situation, and then personal growth for me. So I think you're muted. There you go.
Got it.
Great, guys. Great dialogue. And I think this is important, that these conversations happen, right, between people who look like us and between people who look like you, because I don't think, and our next question will kind of attack this, but I don't think it's happening as regularly as people think, right? Especially, I mean, even now, if you just kind of look at the tide of social media, people are kind of easing on to the next tempo, right? It's not as intense as it was maybe 2 weeks ago, or maybe 3 weeks ago to a month. People are kind of back into the social wave of things, looking at TV shows. Will and Jada's a hot topic right now. Like the dialogue around racism and justice and just the American experience is not on display anymore, right? And I think that's why we want to keep the dialogue going. So you guys sharing your experiences and your perspectives are significant. You know what I mean? A lot of people are going to be watching this. They're going to be reminded of what's happening in the world. You know what I mean? And again, for those watching, hopefully you are also having the same conversations regularly, because that's again, as Christians, we're interesting because it's like we're not necessarily looking for solutions, right, per se. It's, we understand the narrative of human history, but there is a proper response to these things.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think dialogues like ours assist in revealing that to the rest of the world, because we are the light of the world, right? So great perspective, guys, and thanks for sharing that. So our next question stems around Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter, right? Very interesting sort of
perspectives, right?
Tension going on there. I guess, how are you guys approaching that conversation of Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter? Where are you guys at with that conversation altogether?
I'll go first because I think I'm a little bit more impatient with whether it be maybe some family members or friends, because I'm, because they're just like, well, again, it immediately goes to politics. And I was like, and so I will say this for like the first thing, I would just be like, just say it. Just say it. And they feel like some people, I'm not talking anybody in particular, but what's been my experience is that some people, they're just like, they'll say it and then they'll say, but, and I'm like, no, man, just Black Lives Matter. Like, it's okay. Like, it's so, and like, especially as a Christian, like a heathen, somebody that's far off from God, I don't expect them to think that any life matters.
Wow.
But I'm like, in this particular climate, like if you don't have like any type of eyes, and you can't just say that, man, like and say it with like, just out of this heart for like, yeah, you matter. Like my friends who are afraid, who are Black, to get on their bikes, to just be where I can just be. And I like, and for that, like, what would it do for us, for other people, just to hear us just in a way standing in solidarity? I'm like, because of Imago Dei, because we all, we're children of God, like, that's right. But then you got other people whom, again, we don't want to like ostracize and cancel people, because I feel like if we just cancel people, we don't give room for redemption, which is the whole point of the gospel.
True.
But there are people that are just being like, instead of that, just being like, no, all lives matter. And just realizing that, just again, where I'm cutting out all the, and I don't want to like, talk negative about people that aren't believers, but I feel like we have if anybody has like something to stand on, it's Christians, because I'm like, no, this is actually in the gospel. And so I have a bigger footing than somebody who's, 19 different, personalities or whatever. So like, I like when you say that like all lives matter, you're, as a Christian, it's like someone's like, oh, like my, like, man, I'm just really struggling. So I'm like, well, we're all struggling with sin, dude. So like, get on the boat, like trust in Christ, man. You just got to trust in the Lord.
It minimizes.
I'm like, if I'm there in that moment, I'm just kind of like, I really feel like you didn't hear me. Like, I literally just like, I'm coming to you, or like people are afraid and they're crying out. And there is this groaning, and it's creation. It's God's creation. And we forget that. And I think a lot of white people forget that. I'm like, hello, like it's all of creation. And when you see it, like, man, when George Floyd was crying out for his mom, as a parent, I'm just like, I like immediately when Amelia wakes up in the middle of the night, screaming, like, just for us, like I'm like, there's nothing stopping me, because she knows that I'm going to be there. And I'm like, and if you can't just say, for a believer, and I'm talking to believers, you have to throw out politics. But people don't want to do that. They're like, well, I don't want to be a neo-Marxist. And I was like, you need to, like, I'm like,
you need to be
stop, man. I'm like, even if you were a neo-Marxist or like a socialist, I'm like, dude, there are socialists that share the same doctrine, that share the same like statement of faith as you do, like in a different country, and they're not any lesser or better because of their political leanings.
Yeah.
They get to enjoy free healthcare. Cool for them. I'm like, I got to pay a premium. But as politics aside, it's just kind of like, I feel like I see this picture, guys. I see this picture of like somebody needing help, and they're just wanting to see if anybody's there listening. And for me, I'm not even worried about all the politics, because I feel like me saying Black Lives Matter is like sifting through and pushing all the people aside to make myself present and know and saying like, hey, you're safe with, like, you're safe. Like there's a safety, there's a commonality here, at least that we share, that you believe that you matter. I believe that you matter. Like, so again, I might have just gone a little bit, but whatever. That's how I feel about it. Black Lives Matter. Yeah. And people are like, well, they want to say I'm a terrorist. I don't even know. Like, I don't follow any of that. I just believe that they do. But I'm not gonna go. You won't catch me saying all lives matter, because that goes without saying if you're a believer. So, but in this season in particular, and in all of the seasons, Black lives do matter. So
yeah. Nice. What about you, Tori?
Yeah, I feel like social media is exhausting, and I'm tired of it. Like, I don't post a lot in general, but
because you got like a real job,
especially when all of the social injustice issues were coming up and Black Lives Matter movement, I feel like people have been nitpicking and, like, I don't know, bored, and they're just like, I'm going to research this and nitpick every little thing that's wrong with this. Like, we agree, like, Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. Now, I don't want to talk about, like, the political party, Black Lives Matter, because I've learned, like, they're extremists in one end. But I just feel like, okay, we're going to focus on that, and we're going to focus on all the problems with this party, instead of realizing, like, hey, especially as believers, like, we have brothers and sisters in Christ who are being oppressed. And, like, you read the Bible about Jesus finding those that are being oppressed and reaching out to them and giving the gospel to them. And, you know, Jesus cared for the widows and orphans, and we're called to love one another. So that's how people will know that we're believers. They'll know Christ by seeing that we love others, because that's what Christ did. And I just feel like I'm tired of it. Like, everybody is just nitpicking, like, of course all lives matter. Of course, like, abortion is a huge issue, but that's not what's being brought to light right now. What's being brought to light is, like, Black people literally being murdered unfairly in a racist way. So that's what we're focusing on right now. And I don't know, I've had friends on both sides, but, like, very right-wing Republicans that are saying, like, well, what about abortion? What about this? And then you have, like, leftist friends who are, like, protesting and everything, and it's just it's exhausting. And
and it's, you know, and I think for, like, we like, when we're characterizing the left and the right, I think for us, like, when we characterize, like, the left in particular, it's like we would say, like, the left is trying to find an answer, or at least some of our friends or people that we are, you know, associated with are trying to find an answer outside of the gospel. So, like, we're trying to, like, not stay in the middle. Like, we're not trying to just be like these really hip moderates that, you know, are trying to play the middle ground, try to play both sides, keep everybody happy. We're just like, no, like, this is how we're rejecting both idols on either side and choosing. Like, I believe the motivation behind me saying all of this and believing all of this is Christ. And, like, beyond that, it's all, you know, people are just a little insane right now. But we got to try to figure out how to help people. That's been the hardest thing and I'm sure you guys, you know, have been exhausted, you know, just trying to deal with all of this, but realizing that people do need help in understanding this. And this is not coming from, like, an elitist, like, oh, we have everything figured out. This is just like, I'm learning. And, like, when I look at Ephesians 4, you know, and striving for unity, you know, the unity that Paul talks about, like, we have to have humility. And I feel like people are just so, like, bent up. And I mean, I will say, I will give it to some of the right people that have, like, done so much research, be like, did you know that person that you shared is Louis Farrakhan's, you know, 8th cousin twice removed? And I'm just like, what? How did you know that? Like, why don't you actually do other research? Like, when was the last time you read a Black author?
Wow.
Have you read a Black author?
It's like,
Like,
you're missing the point.
like they're like, I'm like, oh, I listen to rap music. I'm like, that's not, no, man. Like, I'm like, no, we're just, okay, we're done. We're done. So what are you going to do?
I mean, this is a very loaded conversation we're having. You know what I mean? Like, any one topic, we could probably spend the next 5, 6 days really grappling with. When I think about politics, I think about when Israel begged God for a king. Like, give us a king. Give us a king. Because all the other nations have a king. Give us a king. And I think it was Samuel, if I'm not mistaken. Samuel's like, guys, are you serious? Are you really serious? Because God is our king. Did you miss it? Did you miss everything? Did you miss all of history? Did you miss the entire narrative of Abraham? Like, guys, he was pissed off, and God was like, no,
Give him a king.
give him a king. And Samuel's like, well, all right, God has spoken. Here's your king, Saul, borderline incompetent, unfaithful, and God's gonna have him lead you. And it's almost like God's like, you're gonna see this, guys. I'm gonna teach you what life is like without me. And when you just see how Israel's history unfolds after that, you're just like, oh, so people really can't do this ever. You know, if Israel is a microcosm of the human experience, at some point we have to come to grips, well, at least Christians, because again, we have the revelation of God. It's not going to work politically. It's not going to work. You don't fit in any of the shoeboxes, Christian. You just don't fit, you know? And God revealed this to us in ancient history, that it doesn't work that way. So I don't know, man. It's tough for me to get involved politically, because I'm like, man, the solution is so, what am I trying to say? The solution, I don't even want to use that word. What humans need to be doing is engaging beyond the political realm, right?
Yes.
Like, we have to, like, okay, politics, great, you know, have that party, have that event, great, but let's now just have coffee together as two people. Let's now discuss Black authors, and let's now just discuss American history objectively. Like, we have to move beyond the elephant and the donkey. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm an elephant, you're a donkey. That's the entirety of this conversation. I mean, I'm mind blown at how shallow that could end up, you know, if you don't move into actual humanity and engage with other people like we are tonight, right? To think that conversations like these, I got to keep saying it, are not happening, right? Black people are talking to Black people. White people are talking to white people. Guys, I mean, and this is just gonna magically solve itself. You know, we're not gonna talk. We're not gonna publicize conversations between white people and Black people. We're gonna publicize tension. We're gonna publicize disarray. We're gonna publicize discontent. This has to be publicized, right? So people can see what regular dialogue looks like. Because there are some people right now, there are Black people right now who cannot talk to a white person because of the anger inside of their hearts, you know what I mean? And vice versa. So I don't know. When I think about politics, I get so broken inside, because it's so not the root. It's not the way that's going to lead us to the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. And what I hear you saying, babe, is politics isn't necessary, but Jesus is. Yeah. And so for the Christian who is struggling right now with saying, like, kind of like what you were saying, Adam, Black Lives Matter, to me, what I hear from that person, if you're a believer, like, we're not talking about people who don't believe in Jesus, right? Like, specifically, we're talking about the believer who struggles with saying, this person's feelings and experiences, although be it different from mine, although I can't relate, and I honestly can't even see it, I care, because they're made in the image of God. I think if you are a believer and you struggle with that, then that points to an idol. That points to just clear as day, something that you are trusting other than God as a necessity, right? And so that's my heart. I literally dropped a video on this today, but it was more geared towards like Black Christians, because a lot of people, it's just crazy, guys, like pray for your Christians right now. And that's something that I see over and over in scripture. Like I'm reading like a lot of Paul, Timothy, Thessalonians, going on and on about praying for the believer. And like I have to constantly remind myself every day, Jamie, you need to be praying for your brothers and sisters in Christ, like all of them. Because I see how Black Christians right now are being targeted by these cults saying, hey, like, look at what the white Christians are saying. They don't love you. Whew. Does God really love you? This is what they believe. And so I'm hearing that, that thought being pushed, and some Black people actually saying, yeah, you might be right. And then, on the other side, I'm seeing white Christians who are saying, all lives matter, man. Let's just wait until this passes. Pastors. And so, of course, my heart breaks when I see this isn't biblical. This isn't what Jesus would do. And I think another thing that I've seen both Black and white Christians do that I want to address is, and you mentioned this too, Tori, is saying, well, we should be focusing on abortion right now. We should be focusing on sharing the gospel. We should be sharing on missions.
Black on Black crime.
We should be focusing on Black crime, which Black on Black crime. What about white on white crime? What about, but anyways, that's a whole nother topic. Right, but what I want to bring it back to is that, dear Christian, these things are not exclusive. You can share the gospel of Jesus at Walmart and simultaneously see a Black man being mistreated and say, hold on, I know I was sharing the gospel with you, but this is simultaneously a part of me expressing the gospel of Jesus Christ. That this woman who is, being harassed by a cashier because she has a different skin color than I am, that's also an expression of the gospel. So when I see Christians say, this is not what we need to be focusing on right now, missions and abortion, of course, that's common sense. We cry out for the life in the womb, but we also cry out for the life that is out of the womb, right? I would think at this point, this is a common sense thing, but obviously being that we're having this conversation, it's not. So,
right.
So happy to hear you, you both share those thoughts.
Yeah. So that was pretty much all of our questions for you guys. If you have time, if time permits, we want to know if you guys had any questions for us or just anything in general. Any closing thoughts?
Anything for me?
No, I would just one thing. How do you? I have a response to. So you mentioned briefly, and like you said, any type of thing that we talked about can like go down a rabbit hole. And
I have to make this like a 4-part series.
Yeah. But I would say maybe this could be like my question to you guys could maybe be a prelude into something else. But how does it make you feel whether you're trying to have a conversation with somebody that like a white person, or you see a white person that you care about, instead of maybe reaching out to you or standing in solidarity, post a picture with, and I'll say it in air quotations, stats, because I believe that there are certain stats that aren't reported, which is like, for me, I'm just like, this is fake news, because I'm just like, yeah, you think they're going to report it? Like, and people need to just watch like 2 Dave Chappelle specials to even get that. You don't even need to do any hard research, really. Like you probably already heard it. So like, how does that make you feel when you're trying to navigate this season and you're trying to say like, basically speak truth, but then someone comes at you with statistics? That's like a big, like, so I'm just saying, like, I'm kind of, I don't want to say in camp, like, but I know that is like I don't even say tactic, but like something that people will throw out will be statistics. I argued the validity of those. But so anyways, that's my question. How does that make you feel?
I'll take this one first.
Okay.
It's, I don't know. I don't know if there is, it's, okay. I think it's a clear sign that this individual does not care deeply about me. Simply put, this person does not care deeply about me. And because I'm even being gracious enough to say they probably do care about me to some degree, but not deeply. Because I don't know. I'm having this image in my mind. So there was I don't know if you guys saw the video, probably not. I don't recommend watching any more traumatic videos on the internet. There's already enough out there. But there was a burning building, a mom and a daughter were at the top floor. The building's on fire.
Oh, I saw it.
And the mom, in her last-ditch effort, runs to the balcony, throws her child off the balcony. I mean, this is a last-ditch effort. A black guy, and the race here has no bearing. It's just interesting. This is a white woman, black guy. Black guy runs and slides. I mean, he's a former football player, just throws himself to catch this child, catches the child, saves the child's life. The mom passes away.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine. This is how crazy, so your question, this is how crazy that looks to me. I can't imagine while this building's on fire, this woman and her child on the brink of death, someone on Googling how many buildings in the area catch on fire and whether or not we should save this particular group of people. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, that's how that question reads to me. And I use that extreme imagery to describe sort of the genomes of that response. You're telling me, and again, you said this earlier, Adam, 8 minutes. I mean, this isn't a video game, right? We're not watching WWE. 8 minutes of a man on another man's neck. I mean, we're watching a horror movie, right? You witnessed this. You experienced this with me. And instead of walking away utterly traumatized, right? I'd be traumatized having seen a mother throw her child off a balcony. Rather than you sharing in my trauma, again, that's a big word. There's the word I've been trying to unearth. Rather than sharing in my trauma and me looking at you saying, hey man, this is my life. You know, I was talking to some coworkers who were asking me a similar question. I was like, I look like George Floyd. I look like a black man, right? That could have been me easily. You know, I could have been Ahmaud Arbery. I could have been Breonna Taylor. It's just, it is what it is. And that's the black experience in America. So when a tentpole event happens where all of the world can finally share in the trauma of blackness, you expect the same response that black people have. Like, yo, do you see? This is my life. This is our experience. And for you to respond, well, statistically, you guys kill each other more. All right, man, I'm just going to go ahead and head out now. See you later.
That's not what matters.
Yeah.
That's not what matters. Like,
yeah.
I can't even talk to
the point.
And beyond that too, man, there's just, again, there's so much in it. Like, I mean, you have to go back, like, really even 400 years, like, to just see, like, the psyche of somebody being like, yeah, I can fit. You know, I'm looking at the sides of this table and getting emotional because it reminds me of, like, when I went on the Amistad and I saw the space that was given a single slave, black person, and just thinking, like, yeah, we're over it. And to think that psychologically, like, if we know about, like, if we get educated about it, how much more so a black person who, like, it's a part of their heritage, that this was their story of coming here. And then there's other crazy people that are being like, well, you know, they were also sold. I'm like, we're done. Deleted. Yeah. I'm like, oh, so they walked on. Cool. All right. I'm makes sense. I'm going to go sit in like a 3 foot square, whatever, like it's crazy. And to think that doesn't, like, that societies were built with things that maybe not were as intense, but were continually built upon these ideas of treating people a certain way, that it's going to go away or it doesn't exist. But like, no, they're fine. Like, well, they fight each other more. Like, why do you think, let's talk about the bigger problems. Like, why are there other disparities and why are there other issues?
Yeah.
So,
and like, it was legislated away, therefore the sin in man's heart disappeared.
right?
Yeah, that's a great response. No, legislation can't change the psychology that you just
The human
exposed.
heart, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, just like the Civil War was just about finances. It's purely financial.
So I was actually talking to my cousin whose husband is from South Africa.
Oof.
And they're very segregated, and their legislation has laws regarding, like, the rugby team. You have to have this many Black people and this many white people on the rugby team. So look that up if you're interested.
Apartheid.
It doesn't work. Long story short, she was telling me, like, it's made it worse. It's made the issue worse. So I just learned about that because South Africa is very segregated.
Yeah.
It's a predominantly white Dutch colonization, but the Black people that are there were slaves at one point, similar to the U.S.
Yeah.
And I think it's even as radical there, where there's some white communities in South Africa that are being terrorized by Black communities in light of these things. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's almost like taking on a different host. You know what I mean? That spirit has a different host, and now there's Black people terrorizing white people.
Right.
It's
It's
crazy.
sin.
It's sin. But like, I just one thing, because I met somebody that moved from South Africa to New Zealand because of that. Yeah, it was almost, and he was a white, obviously a white guy, and he was just like, yeah, it's just like out of, it's almost like this out of nowhere, we were getting terrorized and stuff like that. And I was just kind of like, hey, listen, I'm really sorry that you may have been shot at, your family. I'm like, that's bad. That all of that is like a root, we'll call it a root of sin. I was like, but if I may, let's like dial it back a little bit and wonder why there were problems. Like, obviously we can go back. Sin is the bigger problem, but I'm just like, don't
miss that these individuals were actually living there before someone decided to colonize the land and enslave them, right? So let's not miss let's not just say, oh yeah, that happened in the past. Slavery.
Yeah, or like, I didn't do it, like, or just being like, so like, why is this happening? And I'm just like,
exactly.
I could tell you why, bro. Like,
and I think that, like, it's so important to recognize, even with psychology. I feel like trauma is something that we're beginning to understand a little bit better now. And I'm like, are you really surprised that the trauma that happened to our ancestors, and I think something that we don't speak about often is the trauma that happened even within all America, white Americans as well, right? And so now that trauma, I believe, takes on a different phase. When I'm looking at it, I'm like, yo, these radical white men and women who hate Black people, this is something that is being taught. This is something that is being passed down. We thought that the Emancipation Proclamation was going to fix it. We thought that the Civil War, the North winning the Civil War, the South, a lot of states have rewritten history, right? Like, I was going to Texas and I was like, wait, they rewrote the Civil War? Like, just talking to my Black students in Texas, it was very eye-opening that slavery was not even a word used in their textbooks, that it was involuntary servitude, which is what is used in place in Texas. So definitely, if you're watching this video, do your research as to what is taking place. Don't just take your mother's word for it. Don't just take your grandmother's word for this is who Black people are, or this is who white people are. I pray that this encourages you to have a conversation with someone who looks different from you. So that's really our hope from this conversation.
Yeah, that's good. Well, what's up?
Yeah, so that is it, guys. I really, really enjoyed this. Adam and Tori, do you have any final last words for the people watching?
I think this is good. Like, keep having these conversations. Might be awkward. I don't feel like we're close enough. Like, I don't feel like it's awkward, but if it is awkward for people watching, like, start having the conversation. Like, I feel like we can start the change. And I mean, we're both parents. I take it as my responsibility. Like, let's help the next generation. Let's help address this issue and teach our kids and be that role model for them. And pray for change, pray for people's hearts. And I have faith that we'll see that at least to get better.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I would encourage people, like, really, like, do research, and that's not just like a pushing away, but like it's do research, and ask, for Christians, just ask God for humility, and to be able to listen to very difficult conversations. And that's been my season, at least for me. It's just, as much as like I can say, like, and celebrate, my family that's diverse, or like my diverse upbringing or whatever, or growing up in South Florida in this like kind of utopia, it's still, there's still things that we need to recognize in our, at least speaking from like an Anglo person, in my own heart, that I need the Lord to weed out. And but we need His grace. And I just encourage the believer not to be polarized by the words that we were saying, but walk in humility and ask God for grace, because we're not trying to demonize, I'm not trying to demonize Trump supporters or white, like we use the words conservatives and people on the left. We're not trying to like demonize anybody. I believe Jesus Christ is the answer to this problem, but part of it too is just, just asking Him to reveal and to shine a light. That's what He does, what the Spirit does. So that's my hope for all of us, and moving forward, that we'd all continue to grow, that it just wouldn't be, like you said, Jay, like the conversation would continue, not just be like, because I know some people are just like, dude, we're going to let this blow over and we'll be good. I'm just like, I don't want to be with you on the other end of this, So yeah, that'd be my hope.
Amen. Babe, any final words? All right, guys, thanks so much for watching. And Adam and Tori, thank you so much for being willing and joining us today.
Yes.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
We got to do this again.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Let us know. We're down.
Eventually one
That'd
day.
be cool. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah. All right, guys.
All right, guys. Have a good night.
Night.